For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual wickedness. The Bible means what it says, and it says what it means. We're not just fighting physical evil out there like the New World Order and the Illuminati and the like. We're fighting spiritual evil behind the scenes. Behind the veil of the physical world is a spiritual world that interacts and influences our physical world. And essentially, many of the evildoers out there have become hosts for spiritual wickedness, for wicked entities. And essentially, these wicked, evil spirits feed off of people like parasites. And they control people like toxoplasmosis, if you will. But in a very real way. And people that have journeyed on the spiritual path for quite some time have had their own encounters. But this spiritual wickedness manifests in all sorts of different ways, not just the classic, stereotypical demons and the like, but you've got all sorts of dark energy flying around out there, especially at night. If you live out in the country, you can see these things flying around like dark comets, if you will, at around the altitude of clouds. On a clear night, you can see these things flying around looking for trouble. But essentially, nightfall is the invasion of dark entities from the other side of the planet. You can see them falling into the darkness. And this is why most of the evil happens at night. It's not just because it's harder to see and easier to get away, but essentially, when darkness falls, the evil spirits come with it. And so it's important that you protect yourselves, or you'll be victimized like most of these people. And if you've made it this far, then perhaps you've been doing some things right. But it's very important to stick with what the Bible says, because it's your guide, it's your foundation. It tells you why things are good and why things are evil. And beyond that, you don't really need to know much more. But if the Bible says it's good, then you can do it. If the Bible says that it's evil, it opens you up for demonic attack and demonic possession. And so it's important to protect your temple. It's important to protect your body. It's like a city with or without walls. And every hole, if you will, is essentially a gateway into your soul, your eyes, your ears, your mouth, and so on. And so it's important that you do things the proper way. That you're not watching filth all day long, that you're not watching propaganda and mainstream media and the like. Because it's all lies. If you spend your day listening to lies, you're just living a lie. And it's important that you protect your ears, that you're not just listening to noise and to, rap music and heavy metal and the like. It has an impact on your soul. It has an impact on your state of being. And it's important to control what you're eating, that you're not just eating junk food out there, that you're not just eating GMOs, because then you become a GMO. You become a Frankenstein. And the more synthetic you are, the more prone you are to demonic control. That's the reason for the vaccines and many other things. They want to change your natural state into an unnatural state. It's the same reason for the mass. The less oxygen you have, the easier it is for, demons to take control. The demons thrive on oxygen deprivation. All of these people that are demonically controlled love the lack of oxygen. They love pollution. They love, an environment that stinks and that reeks. They love that kind of thing. But we're, offended by it, as we should be. So you have to control, basically everything that enters your body in a way that you might not necessarily think is a big deal. But don't stick around, a polluted area. Don't breathe in, chemicals and toxins and perfumes and the like. Don't listen to the trash on television. Don't watch it. And don't spend your day just talking about nonsense, idle talk. Because all of that generates negative energy and pollutes the metaphysical world and makes it more difficult for the rest of us that are fighting against it. So you really have to, discipline yourselves according to the Bible. That's absolutely important. There's no replacing it. And this is why, the LBGT thing is such a big deal. Because these people are just, pumping themselves full of evil all day long. And you'd be surprised, just how big of a deal it is to be sexually promiscuous these days outside of marriage. We just call it fornication or, sodomy and the like, but it's a really big deal. It pollutes the metaphysical world and drags you into all sorts of sin that stains your soul. And so it's important that, as you mature, that you discipline yourself so that you're in control of what's coming into your body, first and foremost. Then you can start fighting back on the spiritual plane. But getting on that road towards holiness begins with controlling what comes into your body, what comes out of your mouth, and understanding that the Bible is there to teach you the right way. And so you should take it seriously. You should spend your time there, more so than ever before, because the dark side hates that. The evil hates that. The devil hates that when you're reading the Bible, when you're listening to the Gospels. It's on tape. It's on audio. You should be listening to it as you go to work, as you go to school. Instead of watching television, you should be, listening to the Gospels. You should be listening to, the books of Moses, the Old Testament, understanding the laws. Why are things the way they are? And you'd be surprised in just how many ways people are sinning these days. It's become so commonplace that people don't even appreciate how wicked our modern society has become. The Bible makes a big deal about image making. And, we shouldn't be making images of people at all, like pictures. We shouldn't be taking pictures. And people are just taking selfies all day long, listening to trash, watching movies, spending their time, essentially, flaunting what they have and making people jealous and the like, going after married people. I mean, it is hardcore wickedness in our society out there. And that's why the world is turned into what it is. We've gone from Leave It to Beaver to, two men plowing each other. And it's, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. And so people really need to fight back in a spiritual sense. They need to fight back where it'll actually make a difference. And so you got to clean yourself up, and then you can start influencing other people and talking about the Gospels and talking about things in a proper way and not in a, lustful way, not dragging other people into the mud, if you will. And, save it for marriage. Do it the right way. Do it the old-fashioned way, because there's a reason for it. It makes all the difference. And once you start living, a proper life, believe it or not, that's when things will really start to get interesting. That's when you'll start having encounters of another kind. You'll start seeing the demons. You'll start seeing the spiritual wickedness in many different ways. You'll start seeing the dark entities fly around at night. Otherwise, they don't really need to bother you. Otherwise, you're working for them, ladies and gentlemen. And that's not where you want to be. And so it is important that you work at being a better Christian. Believing is the first step. But acting like you believe is a whole nother thing. And being respectful in every way, the way you talk, the way you write online, the way you think, are essentially the next steps to your enlightenment. And, it goes, beyond that, way beyond that. We've been talking about that in some of the other broadcasts, fighting this war with the full armor, with the sword of the Spirit, in a physical, metaphysical, and spiritual sense. But you'll never get there until you master yourself, in a sense, until you discipline yourself to being a good Christian, to being a good practitioner, controlling your anger, controlling all of the negative emotions that are in your life. And then you can start moving forward. And then you can start having an impact in the spiritual war. But that's where it's at. The physical world is just like a veil. Behind it is another world, a spiritual world, like a parallel universe where other things are happening. And they're influencing what's happening in this world. Kind of like a tree where its, roots are in the physical world and it actually goes up into the spiritual world. And so a lot of the spiritual wickedness is feeding off of, the physical world. And the real battle is happening in the spiritual world. And so you have a responsibility to play your part. And it begins by not polluting the spiritual world with, evil acts, selfish acts, or even acts of ignorance. A lot of us when we were younger would throw things out the window and not really care. But as we get older, we understand, we don't want to pollute our environment. But this is happening in a spiritual sense as well. Every sin, every selfish act, every meaningless act that we engage in essentially pollutes the spiritual world and makes this world a more difficult, a more disturbing place. And it's already become very disturbing. Look at the world right now. It's like the Twilight Zone. And it's only going to get worse unless people step back and actually appreciate what's going on. But there's only one way to do it right. And that is essentially in the Bible. I'm not going to go beyond that for this broadcast. But, as far as Christians are concerned, there's only one right way to do it. And that's the way it's done in the Bible. Everybody else is doing it a different way. Don't worry about them. Worry about yourselves. Focus on the New Testament. Focus on the Old Testament. It's important to understand the laws and the ordinances in the books of Moses. And so a lot of people think they know the Bible. A lot of people think they're Christians, but they're not practicing their religion. And that is a mistake, not only for yourselves, but in this war against evil. So please spend the time and educate yourselves as far as what's going on in the Old Testament, what's allowed and what's not allowed, because it still holds true today. And so we'll leave it there for this broadcast, but control your gates, discipline yourselves, be like a spiritual samurai warrior, if you will, but not in the pagan sense, in the Christian sense. Be disciplined. Take it seriously. It's not a joke. It's not some kind of fairy tale, ladies and gentlemen. It's the real thing. Until the next time, if you're listening to this, you are the resistance.